And so first off, we've got Jose Guzman, who is the Educational Programs Administrator for Kings Canyon Unified School District. This district is the focus of Bright Spots this week, Bright Spots in Education, which is discussing literally the bright spots in education across the state. So Jose Guzman, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thanks, Ryan, for letting me join you today. My name is Jose Guzman, and I spent about 20 years in Fresno Unified. I worked as a teacher, I worked as a activities director, a vice principal, a district administrator, a principal, and I loved every minute of it. And I enjoyed working with people there. My family is still in Fresno Unified, and Fresno Unified will always be part of my family. In fact, my wife is a teacher at Sunnyside High School, so hello, Wildcats out there. But I was ready in my career to do something a little bit different, and I was contacted to look into moving to a smaller district out in the middle of Reedley, Dunlap, Orange Cove area, and I applied, and I've spent the last 5 years in Kings Canyon Unified. Wonderful decision in my life. I get to work with an amazing team, outstanding superintendent, outstanding board, and everyone at the district office as well as the school sites, and it's probably the best thing I've ever done professionally in my life. So very proud to be part of the team at Kings Canyon Unified, and I thank you again for having me.
Absolutely. And also with us today from the Fresno County Superintendent of Schools is Dr. Corey Greenlaw. He is the Executive Director of Accountability, Compliance, and Grants. So why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about where you've been, where you're at, and how you got there.
You got it. No sexier title than Executive Director of Accountability, Compliance, and Grants. That's one of those ones that everyone aspires to. So I've been with Fresno County Superintendent of Schools for about 17 years now, and I've done a variety of things, from data to assessment to supporting leadership teams to supporting districts in a variety of processes. Right now my area is kind of overseeing a lot of different areas that are fairly technical, from CalPADS to LCAP to some of that kind of area, which is really fun because I get to work with really, let me say it one more time, really smart people. So being the slowest one of the bunch, I try to keep up with them and make sure that I have a somewhat understanding of all the many things they're doing. It's fantastic. I came out of Central Unified many years ago and worked at LCAP. I was a counselor there, and then I was an itinerant counselor going across the district doing mental health counseling years ago. So we are excited to be here. Fresno County Superintendent of Schools is a great supporter of all of this work, and specifically we're just so happy about the work that Kings Canyon's doing to really serve our students, because as I always remind folks when we're doing this kind of work, they're your students, but they're our students too. And so when we look at it, it's the service and the work and all of that expertise that's being provided really does service us as a county. So it's very exciting to be here to talk about some of these things and really kind of hopefully inspire the people that are listening, inspire those that are watching the recordings of this to go out and make some changes, do something different, try something new, really try to implement these things in ways that are going to help more students than just Kings Canyon and the rest. So excited about that.
Amen. Well, thank you for being here. So just an overview of Kings Canyon. They are serving a population that is 87.5% socioeconomically disadvantaged. They are serving a population that's 29.9% English learners. That's coming from California School Dashboard research files there. And you can see that they're actually trending above the state for socioeconomically disadvantaged percentage, as well as for English learners percentage. So they have a unique demographic and a unique need within their district. They're serving 89.9% Hispanic students, so they're trending above the county average and state average there, and probably accounts for some of those English learner students that we saw earlier. But that's just a breakdown of Kings Canyon when it comes to demographic and when it comes to race ethnicity, so student groups and race ethnicity. Now, when we go to the California School Dashboard, and it's an image of one of the tools that we provide, but it allows us to sort by some of those indicator pieces. So we can change the low income percentage, we can change the English learner percentage, we can change the enrollment numbers, right, for certain windows of enrollment, certain percentages of socioeconomically disadvantaged students, and then it'll show who the top performing are, or kind of show the districts of the state, because we're looking at the whole state from top to bottom, looking at their current status level, which is their average distance from standard. Now, for English language arts, when we account for districts serving 80% or more socioeconomically disadvantaged students, the top school there is Kings Canyon Joint Unified. So ELA, 80% plus, socioeconomically disadvantaged, and one more piece, 1,000 or more enrollment. 1,000 or more enrollment. So there's small single school districts and small school districts that are not included in this. But we haven't even accounted for the English learner percent at this case. But Kings Canyon Joint Unified, top performing district in the state when it comes to their ELA results with these demographics. When we look at math ranking, so again, we're looking at 80+% socioeconomically disadvantaged and 1,000 plus students. For mathematics, the number one performing school is Kings Canyon Joint Unified. So really impressive numbers to see, working with high needs students and working with high numbers of at-promise students and seeing successes in moving those students forward. So another piece we wanted to talk about is this is chronic absenteeism. And you'll see that at Kings Canyon, there was a rate of 12.4% chronically absent students. 12.4% of students were chronically absent, and the state was at 30%. Right? So clearly there was something going on where Kings Canyon was able to maneuver to adjust for some of the demands of kind of phasing out of the pandemic regulations into in-classroom learning. When we look at ELA, average distance from standard for socioeconomically disadvantaged students, they're performing at 14.3 points below the standard, which is about 30 points ahead of the state, right? 30 points above the state in performance in ELA for SED students. And they are also performing above the state average for all students as well, if we look at that group, which we just did a little while ago. For mathematics, they're 30 points ahead of the state when it comes to socioeconomically disadvantaged student performance. So they're at 52.4 points below the standard there, where the state's at 84 points below the standard for socioeconomically disadvantaged students. So room for improvement, however, really high results for these student groups that have had a harder time in ELA and math across the state. So it's cool to see the movement that's happening. And so now we're going to get a little bit into the street data. And the street data is, again, what's happening on the ground level, what's being implemented, what are some best practices. This gives us the opportunity to hear directly from the district and the district's support on what's happening and what's going to, where the focus is shifting and growing, where resources being put. Do you remember when I came out to Kings Canyon to visit for the first time with Babatunde, and you went and this was like, your heart was welling up, man. Your heart was like coming out of your chest. You're like, let me show you the students that we serve. And you went and you took us to all of these rural schools. You drove us to places I didn't even know existed. And you showed us where these students were going to school and where your focus was and where your heart was. And do you remember the question that I asked you that day?
You reminded me of the question.
I asked Jose, and the first question I asked him is, Jose, are you a natural contrarian? And his answer was yes. But beyond that, Jose, I'm wondering if, not just to be contrarian, but if there's a spirit within Kings Canyon where it's about questioning the status quo, about asking, why do we do this? What is the best practice? Is this the best practice? And constantly challenging the things to make sure that they hold firm. Is that a characteristic that you see holds true across your district?
So let me answer it this way. One of my superintendent's favorite books is The Contrarian's Guide to Leadership. And I'm sure that you both read that book. It's amazing. Former USC professor, president actually.
Yeah.
It really talks about doing that, challenging the status quo and never being afraid to say, okay, why is that how it is and does it have to be that way? And I think Kings Canyon Unified exemplifies that. It's it's deep into the culture of our district. I'm new, 5 years, it seems like a long time. With the pandemic, longer. Like I like to say that I aged in dog years during that time, but 5 years is not a long time. The core leadership for Kings Canyon Unified has been there for over 20 years. Prior to our superintendent, Mr. Campbell, we had Mr. Juan Garza, who was superintendent. He was the second longest sitting superintendent in the county. And that was really the culture. Was okay, how do we make sure that what we're doing is a weave and not a stack? And that's our superintendent's mantra. Let's make everything integrate into what we're already doing, so we're not constantly reinventing. Because that's counterproductive. Have an initiative, test it out, retool it all the time until it works. And I think that's what we've done in Kings Canyon. And Mr. Campbell likes to then say, once we've done that, we've weaved and not stacked, now we have to support it, support it, support it. And it's not that we're saying support a lot, is we're saying support from the district level to the site administration, the site administration to the classroom teacher, and the support staff that's there to support the students. And so we say support, 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 because it comes all the way down, and we feel that from our county office as well. But most importantly, along to what you're talking about, is how do we take it to the next level? Never being satisfied. We've done well, and that's not a new thing. Prior to the pandemic, Kings Canyon had gotten to the point where we were above the state average in both ELA and Math for the first time in our district's history. And we had been making the steady progress. We were very proud of that. And the pandemic came and really threw everything off. And so we spent the next 2 years really learning, how can we improve? We're on the right track. We've been doing this work, and it's comes from having strong leadership from the board to our district cabinet, to our school sites, to our teacher leaders, to our classified leaders, and everybody working on the same values and goals that we have established. And yeah, I think it is about being a contrarian, saying let's not be afraid to stir the pot, and let's get what our kids deserve.
That's awesome.
I have a question.
Yeah,
I have a
go ahead.
question. Can't help it. If anyone who knows me, I'm always gonna have questions. So as you're thinking about it, I'm hearing things you were doing before, and we were talking beforehand. The pandemic was crazy for everyone. I mean, just sharing experiences of where you were, what was happening, and all the rest of that stuff. If you could point to maybe one or two things, leadership-wise, kind of thinking, what were some things I could say, maybe this was an example, or this was something happened that helped take us through the craziness and then crest that wave as we went afterwards? Because there's been a lot of challenges with, burnout along those lines, teacher retention as a result of burnout. Some of the way that we're trying to change structure of programs, we were desperately and quickly trying to change how we delivered instruction, let alone this idea of making sure we keep kids here and the rest. So that doesn't happen in a vacuum. That happens with leadership. That happens with the idea of structures and systems in place that support. So just talk to me a little bit of one or two things that really worked for you guys to do that.
Yeah, so I know a lot of the people that have tuned in, I know you're probably hoping to hear some silver bullet that's out there to, hey, how were you guys able to maintain these results and keep them going, and actually moving it to where you advance from 21 to 22, because we did fully test in 21 and we were able to see some growth. But I have to say that it's not anything that happened as a result of the pandemic. It was actually that culture that had been established. So there is no silver bullet. And like I mentioned, that was the reason why I made sure that I brought up Mr. Garza into that, is that this is a culture that has taken decades to build. And it was only because of that climate and culture that we were able to do the things that we were able to do. But to your question, it required constant communication, constant meeting. I remember during the pandemic, we were meeting almost every day. First thing we got there, let's get together. Okay, what is it? What do we have to do right now? What are the safety protocols? Our deputy superintendent, Roberto, he became our COVID czar and really was doing everything in regards to COVID, with the HR staffing side to recruiting substitutes to come in and help us out. Every single person on our cabinet was checking in every single day. We had since the COVID pandemic, we've had 2 cabinet members retire, and they said, we have to help us through this pandemic, and I'm so glad that they did, because it would have been crazy to transition without them, and they were huge support. And it was just a matter of really being open to the dialogue and not always agreeing. And our superintendent gave us clear direction. You guys are gonna figure this out together, and as a team, we're gonna get through this. And then he was the first one out there communicating. I remember when the pandemic hit, I'll go back to that date, right, March, and we were waiting. I remember the president was gonna make an announcement, we were waiting for the governor to make an announcement, and nothing came.
Yep.
Nothing came, and then next thing you know, schools are shutting down. So at that moment, we made the decision, our superintendent says, our kids need to come back on Monday. So talk a leadership move, here's one that I'm very proud of our district and our superintendent on. A lot of school districts unfortunately had to close down, they couldn't communicate back with the kids. We said, we have an opportunity here. Let's bring those kids back on Monday, and let's get them, where can you pick up your meals? Where can you pick up your schoolwork? Where can you get your Chromebook?
Yep.
And man, I got goose pimples right now, Corey, I'm not exaggerating, right? That was one of the most amazing things I've ever seen in education, because it wasn't an option. It was like, the kids can't go out like this. So we brought them back, and they were there. We had huge attendance on that Monday. I want to say we're above 95% attendance. Don't quote me exactly on that, but man, and at least, I know it's not the end all be all, but at least the kids that day were able to say, well, we know something.
We know where we're going.
And my goodness,
Yep.
I think that carried us a long way.
I remember that. I literally remember stories, people telling me about what you were doing and the example you were setting along those lines. So yeah, that has an impact.
And I think that set the stage. I think that set the stage, and then the superintendent and our deputy went out to go meet with staff, meet with our collective bargaining partners and say, hey, this is where we're at. This is the context we have to operate in right now. We can get through this together. And it really became that team. Hey, we're gonna provide you safe space to come in and work when we were on Zoom or what have you. And we were having students turn in work. We had it all planned, and that took constant collaboration between our teachers, our site administrators, our cabinet. That weekend that we went off, everybody was at the district office, making packets, photocopying, communicating with school sites. Principals were in their offices, and it was scary. But I think that set the stage for us to be able to execute what we were gonna have to do for the rest of the pandemic. And then coming back from the pandemic, yeah, people were tired.
Yeah.
But it was a matter of saying, hey, this is where our results, as a result of all the work that you did, look at the student results. And that's helped a lot too. Our previous assistant superintendent of CNI, Ms. Benner, was adamant our kids need to test in 2021. And part of that was a lot of these kids had never taken a test, and they were gonna be years behind. So because of her work, and we were talking with the state, should we test, should we not test, what do we do? Well, we were able to test, and we tested about 95% of our students in 2021, so we have something to at least compare.
Yeah.
So we were able to get accelerated on that, and that was a huge help too. When you see the impact of your work, I think it's okay. We can see the light at the end of the tunnel.
There seems to me within the district as a whole, there's this kind of like cohesive vision and camaraderie, and to me that seems to be a foundational piece for success at a district level. And of course, when something is as I don't want to say catastrophic, but world-changing as a pandemic comes upon you, it's easier for you to gather in the face of that great, trial and create a common vision. But it also seems to me that you've maintained that common vision throughout. Can you talk a little bit about what that common vision is? What's at the core of that common vision?
Yeah, we talk a lot about it with our mission and vision, and our mission is so that we provide the programs necessary so that all students reach their highest potential. We have to meet our kids where they are. We know not every student learns at the same rate. We know not every student is going to learn at the same level, but each student can reach their highest potential, and that's our mission. And if our vision is that all students will learn and succeed, everything we do has to be based around that. So going into the pandemic and beyond, if our vision is that all students will learn and succeed, then we have to continuously support that. If we find gaps, support it. Our superintendent and board have been talking a lot about how we define equity in our district. And it's simple, it's know your students, know who they are, know what they need, get them what they need, when they need it, and how they need it. And I think that's the key. So if everyone is speaking that language, hey, what do our kids need? Let's get it to them when they need it. Now, are we there? No, not at all. But I think everyone in our district has the trust that there's people that are doing that work to get that for every student. And again, that comes from that relationship that's been established for a long time. And I've never seen anything like it. You know, when I go, and we just recently had a training at our office, working around collaborative teams. Our new assistant superintendents of curriculum and instruction are really going back to the core of what professional learning communities are all about. And we said, hey, we'd love to have our collective bargaining partners, our teachers, join us so that they can learn as well. That doesn't happen everywhere. And I thought that's an indicator that we have that trust.
Yeah.
And I think it goes both ways. They can call me up at any time. Hey, this is going on. I don't like this. And okay, well, let's see how we can get to the bottom of it and fix it. And relationships, trust, building that community.
Yeah.
And let me take that even further. Our parents, amazing. Our parents also trust us, because if they hadn't, we wouldn't have been able to do what we did during the pandemic. We were one of the first districts to come back. You know, we started off with the cohorts, and come on, man, you have these little kids that haven't been in school for 2 years, and now you're saying, hey, trust me. We can bring 14 of your kids into this one room with 2 adults during the scariest pandemic in our lifetime. And they said, okay, you must have a plan. And we did. But our parents trusted us, and if it hadn't been for that trust, we couldn't have done it.
Talk about that for a second. We saw data that talked about attendance. You guys have your attendance rate is much, the absenteeism. You can't do that without parents. I cannot drive to a kid's house and drag him to school. It's not going to happen. There has to be some component of parent engagement, parent communication to get the kids there. What does that look like in Kings County? What are some of those areas that really work?
Oh man, well, coming back from the pandemic, especially last year, what those numbers are referencing, there was changes. There was allowances. There were policies that were put in place over summer. Well, we said that's going to allow us to get support to kids that would otherwise be out for up to 21 days, right? When the first rules of the pandemic, you got kids in theory that would be out for 21 days. We said that's not going to happen. We can't allow that to happen. And so our student services administrator, working together with our entire team, we're having meetings every week. Okay, how do we make this happen? How do we get these contracts that have to be done for independent study, short-term independent study, right? And how do we get our parents to understand why it's important that they do this, and then they do the work at home, and then they get it in, and all hands on deck approach. People making phone calls to the parents saying, oh, okay, so we better get this working. And the students following up with the Zoom phone calls. Remember, the teachers had to connect with them. Our teachers saying, hey, we're gonna do this for our kids. But it comes down to that. Everybody understands that the role that they need to play, the parents especially, because that work doesn't have to get done unless the parent feels it's important.
And that's a key point when we're talking about absenteeism, as we're looking at the data, and we didn't see that here, is that one of the critical factors that is impacting this absenteeism is the fact that we're not getting these contracts, the assignments done to complete the contracts. And we talked about this a minute
Or they got
before.
there late.
They got there late, and so you're not counting. And so what we know is that now that we've done all this independent study, it's going to be something we're going to probably continue. Things are going to happen. People are going to open this up. It's there. The system's in place. So we need to learn from that. And I'm not saying Kings, I'm saying all of us,
Well, like
to
I
make sure
mentioned-
that we're doing those things, because that is gonna impact us as we go along.
Well, like I mentioned to you earlier today, I really hope that it doesn't go that way,
Mhm.
because one thing we've learned is that the best place for our students is
In the
in
classroom.
front of a teacher
You are
that's
correct.
qualified, that cares for them, and is gonna give them the support
That's
that
right.
they need, right? That's what we
100%
want.
agree.
And so I'm hoping it doesn't go that way, but yes, there's a mechanism there.
Yep.
But then it goes back, how does the district communicate that to the
Agreed.
families? And I would say the goal is, we have programs for you. We have a online charter school,
Mhm.
KCO. If that's what you need, we can make that work for you.
Yep.
But we would much rather you be able to have these options. We also have this for you, and it's a great option.
Mhm.
But I don't want you going on an independent study, because
I agree.
we want you with a teacher, a credentialed teacher, which our folks at KCO are.
Absolutely. I'm gonna ask a question that's kind of something that we talked a little bit about earlier. I see a couple of these ideas around improvement. And so, you know, with us, on the differentiated assistance work that you've been part of for years, and that we've been doing with, is this idea around improvement science and focus on continuous improvement. What's that look like in your district? Before you answer that, I have to correct one thing you said, just one
Go
thing
ahead,
you said
correct
about
away.
us.
Yeah.
I don't love the word support, because support means that I gotta come in and do something to you.
Mm.
We as a county office, specifically with differentiated assistance and at the direction of our superintendent,
Yeah.
is to come alongside and
Yeah.
work with thinking partners. And I know that you can point to people that come with you, that they're not coming in saying, do this, do that. We did that. That was the old days, the old accountability models. We lived through the AGB boards, all that stuff. That is not the model that the state has envisioned, and we certainly don't envision in that way. And so when we look at it, we say alongside, thinking partner, able to help you kind of think some of those things. So that's kind of the way I look at it. So continuous improvement along those lines. What does that look like in your district, maybe even with us too?
Yeah, well, I'd like to speak to that, because I get to work with your team, and I've been able to work with your team for a long time. Under Marvin's direction, his team's phenomenal, working with all of the ALCAP support team, Dr. Sharp, Dr. Gomez, Dana Budd,
Yep.
the whole team, and that's who I get to work with. So Abby,
Yeah.
is actually a great friend of mine. She was a maid of honor at my wedding.
Oh, there you go.
But I don't get to work with her too much.
Okay.
But your DA team,
Yep.
they are, I know you don't like to use the word support, but they
I
give
get
me
it.
all
I
the
get it.
support that I've ever asked for.
Mhm.
I think I was telling you earlier that if it hadn't been for Dana and Annie,
Mhm.
this hair would have been completely white and probably not even there.
That's
They
why I
have
still
saved
got a
me.
little hair.
Well,
You
you
know
have
what I
that
mean?
team,
I've
you're
lost
gonna
it
keep
already.
it.
I can keep my little
I
bit.
think
of
you'll
hair.
keep it,
Yeah.
but they're phenomenal, and
Yep.
they do provide great support to us. And for the districts that are tuning in, I wonder what that support can look like. If they're new to this, ask, and the support is there. So for us, what does improvement look like? I think that was the
Yeah.
original question, and then it comes down to first really understanding your data. So this type of data that we're looking at here, Kings Canyon has been looking at data this way for about 5 years.
Mhm.
And in that time, we've known that among districts that had 1,000 students or more with an 80% poverty rate, 20 or more percent EL learners, that we were number one. We've known that.
Yep.
So when we talk about that culture,
Yeah.
we've been able to talk to our staff. Hey, the work you're doing is great. When you see the dashboard released, just understand there's context. So let's look at the ones that are dealing with the same situations we're dealing with. That's where we are, and that helps.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to look and be, oh, we're number 7. No, we're number 1. And yeah, you know what? A lot of people can poke holes at that. I think that is a rock solid argument for saying, okay, where do we stand in comparison to districts that have a similar situation? We're still gonna chase those other districts. We're still gonna push our kids because they deserve that, to be the best that we can help them be. But in our current context, I think it's helpful to benchmark against similar districts, and that has been great work. So when we look at improvement, it's okay. Understand the data.
Mhm.
What is the data truly telling me?
Yep.
Understanding the problem. Then, I know improvement science dictates that once you decide what that problem is, what changes are you gonna make, and is the change truly an improvement? Because sometimes it's not.
Sometimes it's just a change.
It's just a change. That's another way to do it wrong.
Busyness,
Yeah.
yes.
And we don't ever wanna just change to do another way wrong.
Mhm.
or doing good poorly or doing, bottom line is we want to get to things that work. And so for us, improvement, establishing what those metrics are. How are we going to monitor? I don't know that we're good at that yet. I think we're getting there. Right now, I mentioned the work that our assistant soups are doing with professional learning communities. That's the goal, is to see, okay, what is it that we're trying to move? What metrics are we going to put in place? One of our assistant soups the other day said, hey, you don't know how you're going to measure it, stop doing it. Figure out how you're going to measure it. So that's the conversation that's happening right now at the district level. We've been having trainings with our principals, and it's great work, but it's hard. It's a heavy lift. It's new learning, but it's the right work.
And I'm going to ask a question along that. We're going to kind of maneuver into some of the attendee questions now. But there's a question similar to the topic that you were on, Jose. Melissa Manley, who's on the call, asked the question, if you know that there are programs that are not effective, how do you go about changing it if leadership is resistant to change?
Once we've decided a program's not good and we're able to eliminate it, I don't know that there's going to be too much resistance once we've established the why.
Yeah.
And so we've let go of programs. We do it all the time, you know. But yeah, this is what I will say, is in Kings Canyon, we're going to refine whatever initiative we have until we've exhausted all of the reasons why it might not have worked. So for our district, I can say for a long time we were focusing on foundational skills at the elementary school level. And if we know that if we can get our kids to read by 3rd grade, that they're gonna have a good projection towards high school. And so it's okay, this isn't working, how do we retool it, and really how do we maintain, is it application? How do we try to limit the variability and sticking to it? Now, this could be controversial. I've never been a lockstep guy, because I think our teachers are professionals and they should have some flexibility. But it's like, what's going to be the guaranteed curriculum that we're going to teach? And there's got to be some flexibility around that.
Tight but loose.
Yes. So the tight and the loose elements, that's something that our district has been working on for a long time. And then that's how you say it's not so much the program. It's, let's look at us first. Put a big mirror in front of your face and say, is it the program or is it our implementation of the program? And I think that's where Melissa's getting at on that question. Because if there's resistance, where is the resistance? Now this is now a personal opinion, this is not a district thing, but I had a former superintendent that said to me, no matter what initiative you put in, you're gonna adopt it, and then inevitably people are gonna start adapting it, and then they're not gonna like it, so they're gonna attack it, and then they're gonna abandon it. And so the 4 A's of a new initiative, is it the program? Or was it the implementation? You know, I get made fun of because I think everything can be awesome. You know, the Lego movie and everything's awesome.
So you're a little Pollyanna, right?
A little bit.
That's okay.
I am.
That's a good thing.
I am.
That's a good thing to be.
And I just think, hey, get it off the ground. And if it's working, great. If it's not, why not? How can we make it better?
Let me focus on that why not. Just as a comment to Melissa and thinking about it. A lot of times when I hear people will say, this isn't working, the question we always want to ask back is, how do you know? And that's that why. How do you know? And until we have compelling data that's not your opinion, to go back, gather beyond simply one classroom or one experience or one exposure, it's hard to be able to say it doesn't work. If I have not implemented, as you've talked about with fidelity, following some of those tight guidelines, if I haven't taken that and collected it across, maybe more than my classroom, maybe I'm looking at my school and looking at a couple of those things, and then looked at some of the data that was really aligned to what we were doing, it's hard for us to go to an administrator or someone else who spent however much money the last year or whatever and say, this isn't working, stop. Because we don't want, ooh, I went to a conference, ooh, let's try this summer, and then the next summer I come back, ooh, I went to a conference, let's try that. We've got to do something. So I guess I'm arguing both sides of it as far as how do you get rid of it, get compelling data, get enough of a sample set that you can be able to say this is really what it is. So it's not, I don't think that it's bad. I'm saying the data speaks for itself. So that's really the idea of communication. And good leaders everywhere are going to look at those data and be able to really say, oh yeah, I understand what that's
implement with as much fidelity as possible so that you can remove any of the other factors from the equation besides what you're trying to implement and go, that wasn't the thing. So, very good, thank you. Another question that I think I'm beginning to capture a pattern here in some of the stuff that you're saying, Jose, but I want to see where you're at with this. The question is very simple. What is the number one practice that you attribute to KCUSD's success? And it doesn't have to be the number one practice. It can be, what do you think is a really important practice that has helped you shift the culture in a direction of improvement?
Man, that's a tough question. One thing, well, if I have to, I'm gonna say it's culture.
Yeah.
And it's, you don't build positive culture. You nurture positive culture. And like I've mentioned a bunch of times, this didn't happen overnight. It's happened over 20 years. Strong, consistent leadership. I think there's been 7 superintendents in the history of Kings Canyon Unified, ever. And Mr. Garza was there for 15 years. Mr. Campbell was his assistant superintendent deputy for 14 years of those, and then he became the principal or the superintendent. And then we have very, very consistent leadership at the cabinet level, at the school sites, from our board. We have one of the most stable boards in Fresno County.
Yeah.
And that's great. That speaks to those relationships, and that breeds a culture of high expectations, accountability, of course. I know that's part of your job, is the accountability side, and I think that becomes inherent in the work that we're doing, and it just becomes intrinsic in what we all do.
Yeah.
I know that everyone in Kings Canyon Unified works hard, and they do it for the right reasons.
That was going to be kind of the pattern that I was seeing emerge, was this consistency in leadership, and then with that a consistency in vision, and a safe and trusting community from the top down, right? Because you said from the superintendents all the way to the parents, which are like really important people to have engaged with the process, trust is had. And I think that those are foundational in the data that we've seen. Those are foundational to building these cultures of improvement like you've seen.
Can I offer something as well?
You can offer
to
whatever
answer that,
you like.
to answer that one as well. Not really to answer it for Kings Canyon, but stepping back and looking across. One of the areas that needs to, and we know this, I'm speaking to the choir when I'm speaking because you've already said it, is this idea that what happens in the classroom matters. And when I say what happens in the classroom matters, is that instruction matters. It is so easy, and I'm talking to leaders on this, I'm looking at some of the names and I got a lot of leaders in the West. It's so easy to kind of focus on all these other, it's this program where it's the, we're gonna PLC our way to, this, and we're gonna do this, and we're gonna focus on this program and this, and those are important, and they're good, and they're right, and they're things we should be doing, but in the end, instruction matters. And if we are not focused, laser-like, on what is happening in our classroom instructionally, the resources they receive, the training they have, the way that that's what's touching the kids. That's what's making the difference. And so I love the fact, we just got a new superintendent at our county office, Dr. Kofer. Fantastic to be working with her because the focus is instruction. I mean, I love that because that's where it is. It's this idea that we're going in, I'm the accountability guy, I get it. I'm the budget guy, I'm the CalPADS guy, I get it. But that's not, all those things are not what is most important. What matters most is that teacher in a classroom with the kids, that they're able to really do what they do best, what they train for, all the things that are, that's where it matters. That's my, I want to say that's my opinion, but it's not just my opinion. Because if you look at the research, you look at Hattie, you look at all of these folks, that's where the power comes. The structure and what happens in instruction makes a difference.
Yeah, and I'd like to add to that too. I get to work with our budget quite a bit. And one of the things that we talk about is when it comes to budgets, you have numbers and lines, but then you also have things and stuff, and that's people. And it's what they're doing for students and how well they're doing it. It's about the teaching and the learning. And it's all of that stuff is important. The numbers and the lines, the LCAP, which I get to write. So I get it's important. I wouldn't be doing what I do if I didn't believe it was important. but all of that is done in service of the teaching
That's
and
it.
learning.
That's right.
Social emotional learning, in support of students being okay so that they can learn. Because at the end of the year, when our students graduate and they go off to live their lives, did we prepare them to be successful? Did we teach them what they needed to learn so they could have those choices upon graduation? And that's what we're all working toward. We're all on the same target for teaching and learning. And I think if we don't recognize that, I'm with you 100%. That's what it's all about.
And through the lens of equity. You said it already. That's this idea, and I know that this is, I don't want to say it's kind of it's not a new thing, it's not, but you're seeing it raise up because it matters. This idea of getting kids what they need when they need it, right there. It matters for whoever the students are. If you were to ask across the state of California, who are the kids that, as we look at the data, that perform the lowest? And it is our special education kids. It is. Over the past, ever since we've collected data with Smarter Balanced, it goes 1, 2, 3. Special education, foster, homeless. 1, 2, 3. And then we go down into student groups that are different. But those three are the ones that are performing, that they're struggling the most, as evidenced through the ways that we're measuring their performance. The way, whatever that is. So what does that look like? What does the instruction, the professional learning, the support to our general education teachers on how to teach better to our students who are identified for special education? Not special education teachers. What does it look like for teachers who I'm teaching 3rd grade and I have 5 students who are identified with special needs? What are the strategies I'm helping these teachers learn? What are the resources they're getting to be able to be a better teacher of those 5 students? To be able to meet those. And so these are these ideas that we're looking to kind of, how do we actually accelerate some of that work?
So you mentioned the improvement science and our differentiated assistance status. We are differentiated assistants. No, it's easy to look at these and say, oh, we know what we're doing. We do, but we're not where we want to be. We're not where our kids deserve us to be yet. We're moving towards that every single day. So special needs students, foster youth. That's who we have been able to identify as having the greatest need in our district. And that comment of that 3rd grade teacher, that's huge. Our special ed students spend 90% of their day in the general ed classroom. So it's a systematic approach to how we get that improvement. And that is a huge point of emphasis for this upcoming planning year as we're writing the LCAP. I'm excited, and you probably know more than I do on this. I know that there's a lot of talk in Sacramento about helping bring in students with disabilities as part of that unduplicated calculation. Because I think there's a sentiment out there that, well, those aren't the students that generate those funds. I think once we get to that place, and it will clear up how dollars can and should be spent, and I think that's going to help us as a system tremendously. I know that's probably outside of the scope of this conversation, but it gets me really excited to know that we're going that way.
It's great. It's really good. And we're running out of time almost entirely. But thank you very much. We could go on and probably do this for 2 hours, and I'm sure there's people on the call who would like to do that at some point. We'll let you know when round 2 is. But I just want to say thank you both for being here very much, for sharing your story, most importantly, sharing your heart, because through you, you're elevating student voice in what you do. You're making sure that, I think that the saying of this whole podcast, right, was get kids what they need when they need it now, right? Meeting that need through a lens of equity is beautiful, and it's clear that it's good work happening in Kings Canyon, and that Fresno County Superintendent of Schools is coming alongside of you, I'll use that language now, to support in that work, and we're grateful. So thank you for being here, Dr. Greenlaw, Jose Guzman.